Welcome, everybody. Hello, kids. Welcome to the Capital Life Podcast. I am your host, Abby Pagood, this is where we talk about all the things, the good, the bad, and the healthy. So I hope you guys are having a wonderful Saturday. It is heating up, and that can sometimes be a very great thing, and that can sometimes be a very overwhelming thing, and we just have to deal with it the best that we can. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, and the subject that we are talking about, is all about kind of the spring clean out, okay? We are going to talk about what do we need to do physically, what do we need to do emotionally, and what do we need to do on a futuristic planning concept, okay? So before we get started and into that, I want to bring up our capital partner of the month, which is Zen Holistic Wellness Center. They are a fabulous group where they can handle all the things. They handle the acupuncture, the blood work, the supplementation, the oils. They go around the clock to make sure that you are staying on top of your best healthcare needs, making sure that you're dealing with not only your self-care, but also making sure that you're physically getting what you need out of your healthcare plan, which a lot of places today don't necessarily go above and beyond on preventative medicine, but this place does. So please make sure that you go and visit Zen Holistic Wellness Center. You do not need to be local in order to benefit from their services. So just an FYI. Okay, so we're going to describe a little bit today on what is happening. I would like you, if you're joining us for the first time, even if you're joining us for a numerous time, I would like you to make sure that you like and follow and share. The more we share, the more we care, because we need to make sure we're taking care of not just ourselves, but also the people that we love the most. And sometimes our loved ones are the ones that are holding the most secrets and things that we don't know what's going on inside their head unless they say it. So how would you know if someone could benefit from this if you don't share it to other people? So remember, you can follow us on the Capital Health on Facebook, YouTube, and where you can always get the Capital Life podcast every Saturday at 5:30. But in addition, it is also available on our social media platforms such as Spotify and iHeartRadio. So those are huge ways to make sure that you can listen on the go, and you don't have to necessarily watch. You can just listen. So spring is starting to come in Texas to a very close close, right? And the reason why I say this is lately we have been having some very large heat streaks. So we are actually coming across where we didn't just go straight into spring. It's almost like we skipped spring entirely. So we're starting to hit some of our summer numbers that I have to tell you that some of us Texans are like shaking in our boots a little bit because we're kind of concerned of where the weather's going to be going this summer and how hot it is. But in addition to that, I've also noticed that some of my clients that are in Wisconsin and Indiana and Chicago and Michigan, they are starting to experiencing some very different weather as well. And so that kind of gets me thinking about, what is spring? Spring cleaning is all about the concept of getting rid of all the clutter and getting yourself organized, right? So we start doing some of the planting. When we talk about gardening, what do we do most? We start actually churning up the soil. We clear out the things from last year that didn't necessarily come back, or if it's providing that clutter, we really want to create that perfect landscape so that when we're starting to plant our new seeds, they have the highest potential to grow. They have all the nutrients they need to make themselves the nice, beautiful plant that can produce the things that we need them to do. Because who doesn't want to what's the point in having a garden outside and creating that with your herbs and vegetables if it's not going to produce anything, right? Because then you're just spending a lot of time grooming a plant. If that's your thing, that's your thing. So go ahead and keep doing that. But I would like to make sure that we're trying to get a little bit of benefit with getting our, tomatoes and your peppers and all of those things. But what do? We have to do the preparation. So when it comes to spring, it's not just about getting the clutter, cleaning out the garage or the attic, but it's also kind of looking at our schedules, our businesses, how we function as a whole to really clean out some of that clutter that's no longer serving us. And if we don't kind of do an evaluation on a regular basis, then we kind of get stuck into that zone of repeating the same past behaviors that really take us back to our old version of ourselves instead of embracing the new version of ourselves. So one of the things I like to do when it comes to that, I really like to kind of see what is happening in my day by day habits that is still matching to my needs, and then what habits are no longer technically necessary. So in the past year for myself, I've actually done a lot of personal reflection just of my childhood, because I have quite a little bit of a traumatic childhood. And some of those memories that technically had been hidden or buried started to come up in the last year or two, which happened to a lot of people. A lot of people kind of had a reoccurring PTSD experience and PTSD is not for just our military. PTSD is a reaction from trauma in our life, and it doesn't matter if it was something like a car accident or abuse. It's actually trauma is trauma. It means something that shocks the system, that is in awe, and it takes you to another level. And it can have a positive reaction, it can have a negative reaction, but that PTSD is usually from a trigger that activates and keeps that reflaring up. And when I kind of viewpoint, hey, here, this is what has happened in my past, getting some of those old memories and flashbacks, what ends up happening, I really try to make sure I stop what I'm doing and I process what it is that's coming through. Really learning from it, where I was during that place in time. What did I know? What did I not know? What kind of emotion? Was I fearful? Was I happy? Was I scared? Like what emotion was connected to that time period? And then I try and take a lot of the light and love that I have now for myself back then and try and kind of purify, like taking in my younger self and try and nurture that version of me, because that was a younger version of me. It is not the current self that you know, see, and hear today. It is a different version of who I was. It was a young version, an innocent version, a very vulnerable version of myself. But there are ways that you can address your past experiences and your past things that will help you kind of reevaluate where you were and how you have grown. And what's really important, and the reason why I bring this up for some of you, is because, when we're discussing different quirks and traits, I used to be so very regimentedly organized, okay? Very, almost on a borderline OCD scenario. My husband would regularly come into the kitchen and he would just start moving things around just to drive me nuts. And he would move them, and then I would follow him, and then I would move them back where they were. And then he'd do a circle around the table, and then he'd go and move that again just to drive me crazy, because he knew that obsession of having to have things organized was not something that was necessary. It wasn't important, but he liked to tease and kind of get me all stirred up. It used to drive me absolutely crazy. But really, when it comes down to it, what I found is as I started clearing a lot of the unnecessary baggage that was in my past so that it does not play out in the future, I found that now it's okay that I might have a laundry basket that didn't get folded, or I didn't have time to put clothes away or sweep or do some of the things that before I had to do in order to function on a daily basis. So what my point is with this is, and why I really encourage you, is to dig deep on kind of some of your rudimentary everyday habits that you might be experiencing, and taking the time to see, okay, when did I start developing this kind of behavior? Does it still apply? Is it still a necessity? Okay, even with my kids, there may have been things that used to drive them crazy that I still have a tendency to do, which it may not be necessary anymore. I might be able to outgrow some of those things. So it's really addressing those types of things. I like to kind of think of it as like not just your garden and you have to prepare your soil for growth, but it's kind of the same thing as where when you have a plant, you end up having to trim a portion of it. You trim, ideally, you take a large size plant, you trim about a third of that plant, and that trim or haircut per se promotes growth, which a lot of people don't realize. So this week I actually went in to get a haircut, and not uncommon. I usually go in every 3 weeks ever since I've been, strutting this new look. And when I went in for it, one of the things I noticed is I kept telling her that the last time we trimmed, it grew so fast. And I am notorious for a very slow growth in hair and nails and things of that nature. It's part of my genetics. And when we were discussing my hair, we were talking about how my hair grew so fast that it went past the length that we wanted it at so quickly. I didn't anticipate that, which of course then my hairstylist actually tooted her own horn and said, well, that's a good cut. And then I kind of just joked that I was kind of like I was a plant. Like, I think that the repetitiveness of me going in every 3 weeks and shaving just half of my head was actually creating my hair that needed trim that's necessary to help promote growth, just like a plant. So then we went on a tangent and we were talking about, okay, well, let's say you got your older folks that are having a hard time growing hair. What's your recommendations for them? Just shave half your head, because then it'll promote growth. So if I start seeing all these old people starting to shave half their head, I'm going to know they've been listening to this podcast, because apparently making sure you're keeping up with your trims and your haircuts, it helps promote all of that fun growth. So the other thing that I really want you guys to remember is when you're doing your spring cleaning, the whole point of it is not just to get yourself reset and reorganized, but it is a really good time to kind of reflect over your goals and seeing about where your life and where you want things going. So it's important to keep these kind of concepts in mind, because as we all know, is that life is constantly a state of change, and society has kind of taught us that change is bad, and that's not technically true, because what ends up happening, change is constant. Our cells are constantly evolving, they're constantly regenerating. Change is inevitable, it's always around us. What's wrong is that our perception of change is what is miscued. And what we have a tendency to do is we have a tendency to look at change as if it's a negative, because society has taught us that it is. We get comfortable. We get very comfortable and we get regimented into our regular schedule, and it makes us content. And that is perfectly fine. However, what else are we doing to help us grow and maximize the best version of ourselves? Sometimes we don't even actually know what that even looks like or where that is going to go. I have recently just realized that, where I thought my life was going and my plan was going may be entirely different than what I had thought. So I still focus on my work. I've been focusing on my goals, but then I'm finding new goals that are presenting themselves in a new path. And it's not necessarily a huge direction different from the current path, but it is incorporating new things that I didn't possibly dream of. But what's really fun is that there's a lot of, I don't know what's coming, but I'm very, very excited to see where that's going to play out. And I think it's nice for each of us to say, why don't we get rid of the clutter, get rid of the behaviors that have become repetitious, that we don't necessarily need to perform anymore, in addition to allowing ourselves to follow our intuition, stay with our higher self in an observant state, and start walking in the direction of where we see life going. So that is the summary of our spring cleaning for today. Keep yourself nice and shaved and keep taking care of yourself, because you're somebody's everything. You guys take care and have a fabulous rest of your Saturday.